I would let them fight it out,
Yeah.
let them hit each other, let them get black and blue, and then
When
that's
they're at
when
their lowest, that's when we
we're at the
strike.
lowest. Such vultures, no investors are. So when they're about to be like, when they're
None of this is supposed to be financial advice. This is educational content. To check out our actual financial advice, go to rupeeting.com and check out our portfolios and have fun.
Great. So the topic for today that we've been racking our brains over for the past few days has been the airline industry, and I think everyone's been looking at the headlines recently with 840 planes being ordered by Air India, and subsequently other airlines saying "मुझे भी चाहिए और plane." So, have you guys been looking at that and wondering why this is happening too?
I was just looking at how all the global leaders are very happy about India right after, and everyone's like thanking India for prospectively boosting their economies. Uh,
Right,
and that's just giving so much clout to the current leadership because, well, Tata's ordering planes.
right. But yeah, it is. I think it's set to surpass the order that Indigo made a few years ago, which was around 300 planes in one shot, which is now
Yeah.
490, which are confirmed, and then around 370, which are options.
Yeah, but 840 is also interestingly higher than the total fleet that India currently has.
Yeah, which is at around 700 among what 10 airlines.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
which
700
is
and then just a single order of 840, which is like
yeah,
rebirthing plus some more
yeah,
of an entire country's industry in one shot.
yeah, true. Which makes this a very like pivotal moment because doubling of a fleet, although it'll take more than 10 years for this entire order to actually materialize. It's a huge deal for a previously national airline coming into the private space and challenging Indigo specifically by saying, "Hey, we can now govern a 30% market share eventually. What are you going to do about it?"
Yeah, but that's like saying मैंने plane खरीदा और डाल दिया तो people will come and sit in it.
True,
But that doesn't work, right?
of course
Just
not.
because there is supply in the market doesn't mean that filling up happens.
Right,
So, one, it has to have demand which is proportional or higher than the supply. Or number two, the pricing has to be good enough for people to say that I will fly this airline and not just stick to my low cost carriers.
right.
Uh, so both have to work in favor for not just this order, but any order that anybody places to materialize. And it's not just Air India, right? There are so many more new players coming in. I've
Right.
almost lost track of like their names and who
So
they are.
there is there's Air Akasa Air that's coming in.
That's हो गया ना वो तो आ गया.
That to ho
हाँ,
gaya. Then there's Fly Big, Fly 91.
yeah.
Then there's a comeback of a few, one being Jet Airways, which is finally going to make a comeback, and Air Deccan, which just doesn't seem to die for some reason.
Reincarnation.
Reincarnation at its best. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But then
as
there was
you
one more, right? Among the new ones. No.
is there? No, I think these are it in terms of entirely new entrants. There is
Ah.
also the interesting bit about post Tata Air India merging itself with AirAsia, Air India Express, and now most recently Vistara with Singapore Airlines paying what 250 mil for an extra 5% into the entity.
No, so together the market share, if you combine Air India, Vistara, Air Asia, Air India Express, Alliance, nahi, sorry, these four,
Yeah,
the combined market share comes to,
what 20 point something percent. No,
and Indigo's at 43, right?
no,
40,
no,
40 plus.
56.
Acha, okay, sorry.
They're
So these entities together into one parent
right,
makes it the second largest already,
right,
um, which is quite interesting because everyone individually has like such a low market share, but as a consolidated force, it just puts the
right.
player ahead. Yeah, but that's what like every time. So this seems like an exciting period given the fact that so many new entrants are coming, the older ones are coming back. There is more cash flow available with existing ones, so there's more ability to fire away and make the most out of the industry. Plus, the government seems extremely supportive. Right now, they've said that
Absolutely. Yeah.
Air India gaya, apna tension khatam. Let's focus on like building airports and what we really should be doing, and not running
Yeah.
the airline in a competitive
Manner.
fashion.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so they can focus more on sort of laying the infrastructure and groundwork for the industry to really take off, which makes for a lot of headlines over the last 2 years, and which makes it look like this is a brilliant opportunity. And this is like, for a layman, it just looks like there's so much happening in the sector and there's so much obvious tailwind, that as an investment as well, this will do extremely well. But that's hardly the case,
Right.
right? Because in any industry which is, one, commoditized, and number two, which has a decentish number of players, like telecom at a point in time was, or airlines have always been, uh, there is immense price competition to then capture a larger market share. And this price competition in a environment where either there is heavy capex or the operational costs of running the business are very high, it usually results in a imbalanced situation where your profitability goes for a toss. And eventually, out of the multiple players that have come in hoping to make the most out of the industry and capture a good profitable chunk of it, multiple of them just die down. And you're left with a few players who have scraped through the surface during the good times and then come out as winners, and then the actual good time for them starts. Um, but yeah, and so I think we're currently, despite all the headlines about how this is the golden opportunity for Indian aviation and all of that, we're probably at a stage where this is probably the worst time to invest for anybody, because you are at the very beginning of a large price war, a very large supply coming into the market, and probably a hit on profitability for everybody, and no money being made and no stock returns at all. Um, but yeah, and this has happened like twice over earlier.
Right.
Uh,
Like just taking the 2 decades that have passed, we can clearly see a demarcation in what we can consider a good phase, as you mentioned, and what the market does when it weeds out the excess players and just focuses on few major competitors that actually are able to carve out that market share for themselves. And finally, as you mentioned, that players die out. In the past 20 years, I think 13 airlines have come and gone and made almost no impact in terms of uh, gaining any sort of traction for themselves. Like, for example, I think there have been airlines like Air Odisha, Air Deccan, as we had mentioned earlier, which have scraped by through the system with barely a 2%, 3% market share and 1 to 2 years of service under their belt. So,
on this note, sorry, I've got a surprise quiz.
oh no, of course.
Okay, so in India, which is the airline which has lived the shortest time or been operational for the shortest time? You can't take forever. Three. You either know or you don't know. Two.
I think it's Air Odisha.
Is it
One.
Kingfisher?
No, no. This one called Air Pegasus, which
Huh,
operated from 2015 and shut down in 2016.
a year, oh god.
Oh,
Yeah. So anyway, so some, most of them have not made any mark, but some of them have made a mark, and some of them have made calendars too. And but yeah, the first probably example of this consolidation happening in the industry um, was Kingfisher,
Right.
right? In the last 20 years. Um, you want to talk a little about not the infamy around the promoter and irregularities from a legal or accounting standpoint, but just plainly from a market dynamic or competitive uh, equation.
So I think at the time that Kingfisher entered the market, there was a space that the customers required for a full service airline, because prior to that there was only one that was private in nature, which was Jet Airways, and they governed like a 40 plus percentage in market share, and they were killing it. So Kingfisher saw the opportunity, I guess, and they came out with a very flamboyant airline that initially goaded the public into paying that higher fare. Then they realized that running a full service airline is quite capital intensive. There starts the debt. Then comes fleet expansion, which they did over the course of, let's say, 2 to 3 years within that period where they enjoyed that flamboyance. Then came the LCC movement, as people like to call it in the
I think
airline
that was
industry.
parallel, right? Along
That
with
happened
Kingfisher.
parallelly, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, since people saw Jet's success and given the fact that national carriers at that time were like what 60% of the market,
Right,
and clearly Jet was able to make a mark in this, there was place for more than Kingfisher to pop in.
right.
And while Jet and Kingfisher were equivalent in terms of price and placing themselves as premium airlines, uh, parallelly, I think the LCC model, the low cost carrier model, just popped in, and
Sprung up, yeah.
that was equally successful as well.
Right.
So at the cost of national carriers, both full service airlines as well as low cost carriers were taking share. Right.
I think at that particular point, that was the only point in the past 20 years where you could say that the market was equally divided amongst national carriers and these private players within the full service and LCC, where everyone had like a 20 to 30% market share cordoned off for
Yeah.
each of them,
So
which
for
seemed
Kingfisher, the
fair.
pressure was not only fleet expansion and their
Yeah,
own ambitions around how aggressively they want to expand, but also the fact that low cost carriers came from nothing
right.
and took away that 20-30% market share altogether.
Yeah,
And competing with low cost carriers in terms of price, which at the end of it, customers um, rely on as the biggest decision maker when it comes to choosing the airline or choosing the flight, they clearly started losing out on it.
right. And I think they even tried to embody that sort of full service plus LCC model where they came out with Kingfisher Red, I think, which had like a smaller fleet in itself, and then that just added to their pressure to run as a company, and then eventually dying out.
Yeah, Kingfisher Red was it?
Yeah, so it was Jet Light and Kingfisher Red.
Oh, right, both of them. So Jet Light and Kingfisher
Yeah,
Red, but
so
they were all both were acquisitions of smaller
smaller
companies,
airlines.
right?
So I think Kingfisher's was
So
Air Deccan.
yeah,
Jet,
and
I'm not
Jet
sure.
was this one,
What?
Sahara.
Sahara, right? Correct.
Yeah,
So both of them tried to embody it, and I think Jet Light did okay, even though there was like a split in the consumer's perspective that this was
yeah,
previously a high luxury airline and then now they're trying to go the cheap route and what's their true brand identity. Whereas the LCCs, which was the Indigo, SpiceJet, Go Air trio, stuck to their guns, and now, I mean, they're garnering 65% of the market to themselves, with
yeah.
Indigo doing the most.
Yeah, no, but I think the fact that LCCs grew so much was also, I think, thanks to Kingfisher dying out.
Right,
So the phase after Kingfisher died was also a period where two people did well, right? One is Jet Airways because now there was no competitor which was head on
right,
in terms of pricing or in terms of the quality of service, which obviously an LCC can't match up to.
absolutely.
Um, and LCCs themselves doing well, all three, Indigo, Spice, as well as Go Air.
Right,
And this was the period between what 2008, 2009, and 13, right? No,
yeah,
even after that, actually, it was
yeah, post
2014 to 18.
14 to 18, right.
So post Kingfisher. So that's when, and that's the interesting part, right? Like that was a period where because of consolidation, even though, and usually like all the airfares are determined by how oil prices move as well. That's the single largest cost for any airline.
Right,
So this was also a period that luckily coincided with a time where oil prices were declining. So you had oil prices declining, you had competition waning off, um, and you had the ability to price competitively because the low cost carriers were in vogue anyway and oil prices were lower.
right,
So that was like the perfect recipe for all the players to do extremely well.
right,
Um, and stock prices were like off the roof at that time. So Jet Airways 3x within
right,
that period, Spice to 10x, uh, Indigo wasn't listed, unfortunately. They would have made a killing as well, but they got listed towards the end of that
Yeah.
period, and they too saw 50% return within a year or two. So truly like a golden period again, but that's what the whole point is, right? Like every golden period or opportunity that arises in aviation leads to a disaster right after. And that's the whole point of this conversation as well, because we seem to be at that cusp of like that opportunity right now. But even back in 2018, right after this opportunity, there was a disaster. Um,
And that was unfortunately Jet Airways.
yeah,
2019 they went down, and then I think there was no one to compete with Indigo after that. They just skyrocketed, and no one's been a full service proper airline until right now with Air India coming in.
no, but you've got Vistara and Asia coming in as well in the middle.
I think Vistara was more international, right? No one was competing in the domestic market.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm just saying that
As
after,
a presence, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But during that period, another sort of interesting thing of while Indigo sort of dominated, yes, that turned out to be the only player who won the space in the true sense of the word, while Jet died down. There were also these regional players who tried their hand, right? Because
Yeah.
clearly the low cost model was working. So it did, from a theoretical standpoint, make sense for people to try out the regional model as well, launch these tier two, tier three connections where probably Indigo's not got the network yet because they're still expanding, and try to make use of that white space and build some presence up. But several of them, or all of them, failed.
Yeah, I think the only one that exists right now as that ultra low cost small body aircraft airlines was TrueJet, and they have had like a steep decline in terms of their air fleet
Sorry,
also.
on that note, because you said small body, there's question number
Oh
two.
no.
Yeah, she's all ready to Google now. Just came ahead. Let my hands reach the keyboard. Okay, so which aircraft has the largest passenger aircraft has the largest seating capacity?
737
Wrong answer.
is the only aircraft
Currently
in.
existing or
Yes, sir. Currently existing. The only other alternative is, come on, you can't get. After a wrong answer, you don't know the right answer. मतलब अलग level. Airbus A380, 800.
oh right. How so they're considered the wide bodied international carrier aircrafts.
Yes, they're always comparable, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah. So
Interesting.
I get 2 points. You get 0 points
No, I think
each.
the deal was that since you know the question and the answer, you get point 5 for each. So you
ठीक
have
है,
one.
I'm
You're still
still
winning.
leading.
You're
I have
still
one
winning.
point.
That's true.
ठीक है. Yeah, sorry, you were on small bodied aircrafts.
Yeah. So I think TrueJet is the only one in the current lineup that still has been standing with a single aircraft to their name, which is one I think one of
Oh,
those propeller ones. And they had I think 5 to begin with when they started, and they kept grounding one as the quarters went on for multiple reasons. But as you mentioned, many of these regional players,
Yeah,
even though they came in with the intention of the true tier 2 tier 3 demand shake-up, they barely made a scratch with 1% of their of the fleet market share. They make up just 1%, and that hasn't shifted or moved in any way for obvious reasons.
yeah. No, so clearly, I think I get
so
where theoretically most of this comes from, right? With
Right.
Indigo having majority market share, regional not doing well at all. There is potential for other players to come in and capture some market share when only the three LCCs are doing okay, and then national carriers, obviously. The fate will change now, but till
Yeah.
now, theoretically, it made sense for a lot of, not a lot of, but players coming in to think that they'll do well in
Right.
the market.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's also
Rajesh was
pretty
saying
interesting.
something.
Yeah. Question.
no, no. Is it like the demand side constraint? Is it because we don't have enough airports, or do people don't feel the need for air travel given like there's not enough intercity travel in smaller cities,
So I think most of
which
the
is the
intercity and even interstate, I think 70% of that still relies on railways because it's cheap, it's frequency is much higher, and in connectivity to where they specifically want to go is more. With, let's say, even airports can't begin to fathom that level of connectivity at any point in the next 5 years, even if they open up the new 50 to 80 airports. So that railway dependency, although the Ministry of Civil Aviation made preach that um, they're trying to tap into that first class AC, second class AC market and try to transition them towards the low cost carriers. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because at the same
So
time,
even
railways are
if
also
we had
growing
all those
massively.
airports, there won't be much of a demand change that should be in line with the cost of those airports. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. What do you think, Sagar?
No, so I think so sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, right? Like for I'll give you a live example of like what I like used to do. So when I used to live in Bombay and my parents were in Vadodara, and I was working with Daiwa, so I used to get off work at about 4:30 p.m. Uh, Good life. But so I used to take the train from Bombay at 5 p.m. Rajdhani. Um, and it used to put me in Vadodara by 9 p.m. I used to be home for dinner. And that used to be super convenient. And so I used to sit from, I think, whatever station, I think Bombay Central or Bandra Terminus, yaad nahi hai. But so half an hour to the station from my office. And then from Vadodara station to my house is 10 minutes. So I would complete the journey in like whatever, less than 5 hours, and time it perfectly versus for my flight, I would have to first find a flight that is like it has only two flights, one in the morning, one in the evening. I'll have to find a flight which is at the right time.
Right.
Get to the airport anyway, like 1.5 hours before. Looking at current situations, probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours before. Um, and then get to the airport in Vadodara, which is again further away. So I think time-wise, I just save a lot of it. I save on the number of modes of transport I'm shifting. Um, and I save on waiting time. So it's just more convenient.
And it's much
Um,
cheaper.
yeah, yeah, way cheaper. So there was a time when Indigo would like I think the fares were like 2,100 bucks for a one-way flight from Bombay to Vadodara. So at that time I wouldn't even think of a train. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
2000 mein if I'm getting a flight plus like MMT discounts and shit,
Hmm.
I'm flying. I'm not even thinking about trains.
Yeah, so
So
see, that's the level of discount it requires for someone
yeah,
who's been doing the train journey for so long to actually make that switch. And Vadodara is not that much of, I mean, it's a growing city, being like an industrial hub or whatever.
yeah. No,
But
but even now, it makes
yeah,
sense for me to do that. Like, why would I just take a flight
exactly.
at just two times a day versus having the flexibility of like choosing between 12 trains at least
Yeah,
throughout the day. Um, and yeah, so it just makes more sense. So I don't know, like I'm not too sure about like how much that will boost connectivity or uh, the industry as such, because also what happens is um, the majority of high paying customers are going to be in metros.
right.
Your frequent travelers are going to be in metros. So these incremental additions in tier two, tier three, whichever business it may be, is always detrimental when it comes to your average revenue per user or unit economics as such. So even with the Zomato and Swiggy, for example, like the metros and highly densely populated areas and high paying customers give them a higher economic benefit versus expanding fresh into some tier three town where they have to set up fresh and people the average order value will be half of metros,
Exactly.
but the cost is pretty much similar in terms of fuel. So it makes a difference economically. I don't think it's the best sort of decision at this point.
So
But
as
yeah,
I
like
think while we were
assuming the India
discussing,
story and all that,
yeah,
yeah, 20 years sab kuch bikega, right? So whatever.
well, that's too long term to invest into any particular airline stock as such.
Yeah, no, but
Right,
also the point then is that what can happen is while supply growth is not taking these factors into consideration, right? You're going
right.
from 700 aircrafts in 2022 to 900 aircrafts in 2025.
Yeah,
But your passenger growth still right now is below COVID levels,
yeah,
below pre-COVID levels. So some numbers on that, I mean, even
yeah,
2025, you probably just reach a little higher than what was pre-COVID, but your
yeah.
fleet increase is happening by 30%.
Right. So I think pre-COVID, the passenger traffic or whatever was at 27, 27.5 crores. which dipped to around 16 and a half post COVID, and that has still not recuperated as much as they expected. It has. I think there's been a 50 plus percentage growth, but taking all of these projections into consideration, it can grow to maybe a 30 crore traffic.
30 chalo
But
33 bhi le lo na,
yeah,
because the simple math I'm doing here is that if 700 aircrafts were doing 27 crore passengers in 2020,
yeah,
um, now you're getting to 33 or 36 higher end, right, in
right,
terms of passengers, but you're going from 700 aircrafts to 900 aircrafts.
yeah,
And it's not just the number of aircrafts that matter. You're actually going from probably 10 players to 14 players now.
yeah, 14
Uh,
players.
so you've got newer players who want to make business, who want to make money, who want to aggressively price so they gain market share. So you're in a highly competitive space where supply is greater than demand.
By
So
a
that's
large
the
extent, yeah,
perfect recipe for disaster.
absolutely.
And here we are assuming that oil prices will remain constant. You are lucky if oil prices remain constant or actually go down during this period.
Right,
If they happen to have an upward swing, then you are in too much trouble.
right. Then so I think recently there was a CNBC interview that kept going around, where one of the experts on the panel suggested that the current fares that are going on in the market is what the market should be paying, because this is post government's removal of those caps or whatever.
Caps. Yeah.
Yeah. But there was another expert on the panel that said that the price war is imminent, and I think I agree with him more, because now that the cap is gone and there's so much expansion to cover up in terms of revenue, there's no telling how low the fares are going to be in, let's say, 2 to 3 years when the planes actually start materializing in terms of delivery.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think again it comes back to the same thing, right? It makes it sounds very sexy that so many
Yeah,
players are coming in and India is so lucrative and a large market and it'll overtake the UK in 5 years
yeah,
and not even 3 years and all of that. It sounds great, but then is anybody making money? And in all probability, they're not going to make money.
right.
Um, so probably from an investing standpoint, you're not in a great space, uh, despite how it sounds. But interestingly, every consolidation phase, which was the last 2 years with all the regional players dying out and with COVID happening and all of that,
Jet and everything, yeah.
that sets the stage for an expansionary phase. And
Yeah,
every expansionary phase eventually leads to a price war, which leads to a contractionary phase again,
right.
right? So probably 2022 to 25, you'll see that expansionary phase where all these players are coming in and fighting it out. And I think as an investor, I mean, as a consumer, the best thing to do is fly as much as possible because you'll get tickets cheaper. As an
Absolutely.
investor, the best thing to do is just sit by and let people fight it out and burn money.
Yeah.
But probably enter the market the time the first player faces economic
Distress,
crunch
yeah.
or financial instability, right?
Yeah. Any bets, since we're talking, who is going to burn first? Since there are
See,
14 to choose from.
see, logically, what will happen is in every consolidation phase, what we've realized is that um, anyone with big pockets stands by.
Right.
So national carriers continue to remain steady because deep pockets the government is funding. Even players with established market or with some amount of legacy and some amount of ability to weather the storm have stayed around. Right, Jet Airways did manage to sail through even when Kingfisher was there.
Even though
Um,
they were in, yeah, in the same
yeah, even though
situation.
like yeah, and they had like stiffened up competition, they were losing market share to both Kingfisher as well as low
Yeah.
cost carriers, but they did sail through it. Um, so if you've got like an established legacy, still you kind of go through. So I would assume that with the Tata Group's backing, all the three, four players that do consolidate and form one entity or don't or whatever, they will still cut through because, well, big pockets now. The other thing is low cost carriers do scrape through as well because while they're offering lower fares, they offer lower costs as well. So they operate very efficiently and they are not really into spending big bucks on better meals and sexier staff and all of that. So, so that can survive. Regional becomes a difficult play because of the
Right.
inability to scale. Because this business also is about operational intensity and operational efficiency hence. So if you're operating at a suboptimal level in terms of scale, it is difficult for you to be so efficient that you are uh, not burning money at the same rate as the
Yeah.
others. So I think the newer players will find it difficult to survive. Um, they might just face the same fate as the regional players did when they came back in that phase, right?
Yeah.
Where they appeared for a period of 3 4 years and they died down.
Then died out.
So probably the newer players, my bets would be stacked against newer players,
Yeah.
like an Akasa Air or um,
The
a
true
couple
jet
of the other
variants and all.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, or even the regional ones which are coming up now.
Yeah.
So I would still continue to back either one the Tatas, number two low cost carriers like
Indigo Spice
Indigo
Jet.
and Spice and Go Air. But even amongst the three, one of them may face a casualty because, and not Indigo maybe Spice or Go because at the end of
That'll
it,
be an interesting battle to see because I
yeah,
think both of them are facing a rebrand where Go Air is becoming Go First and SpiceJet has just sold off its cargo business, which is
yeah.
Spice Express. So both of them are turning a new
So they're
leaf.
also getting new cash in.
Yeah,
It's not
right.
like they're not getting
True.
cash in, but at the same time, like competition is increasing significantly as well.
Right.
So for them to still make the cut and because everybody wants to survive, right? So
Yeah.
probably I would still continue betting either on Indigo or one of the Tata players.
Yeah. But
Not
betting on them
because
doesn't mean that Indigo would be a
not
good
now.
stock.
I would let them fight it out,
Yeah.
let them hit each other, let them get black and blue, and then
When
that's
they're at their
when
lowest, that's when we
where are the
strike.
lowest? Such vultures, no investors are. So when they're about to be like, when they're decaying, when they're down on the floor, asking for help is when you say, yes, I won't help you. I'll invest my money in this stock and help myself.
Oh God. Painful. But it is what it is. I think the pattern speaks for itself, and we are going to see this battle of the airlines and
Yes,
who's going to crash and burn and who's going to fly higher. Let's wait and watch.
that's a good closing
Profound.
line. But I have one last question for the quiz.
Yes, sir.
This both of you should know. Okay, so this
Oh
is like
no.
fastest. Whoever's the fastest wins. Approximately. There's no right answer, and hence approximately. There's no exact right answer, and hence approximately. Uh, at what height does
Oh
it
no.
qualify the mile high club?
Oh, 10,000 feet?
12,000 feet.
Waste, both of you.
We're wrong. Oh, are we too low or too high?
I think too high.
Though y'all are too. So wait, no, there's no too low.
So what? 30,000 feet?
35, 36,
30, 35.
37. People use it fungibly.
So when the seatbelt sign is off, that means it's time.
Huh, I think that's the logic. Wow, I
Yeah.
should have thought this through.
Yash, do you have any inputs to give on the discussion that's been
No,
happening?
I think one interesting thought that I just had from all this is maybe we stop thinking so much about airlines and maybe look at trains with all that Sagar said. There are a lot of new trains launching and their last mile connectivity.
Right.
So maybe, I don't know, we should study IRCTC or something. What else is there?
The
What a dick
segue.
move this was.
Oh God.
Yeah, but actually, railways is an interesting topic given the budget and the outlay as well.
Yeah.
So, but not IRCTC maybe. I mean, we can include that in the discussion, but
RVNL, IRCTC.
yeah, yeah. So that will be an interesting one to check out in terms of what subspaces exist within railways, and what can be a beneficiary out of the massive capital outlay in railways.
I think the past few weeks have just been budget trickle down topics, whether it was the first one being our cement.
Cement
Uh,
banks, not airlines.
I
You
mean,
could say that with like
airport,
airports,
yeah.
yeah. But that's everything you can relate to the budget.
That's true.
Cool.
So, talking about the budget, I think there was an announcement about cigarettes as well in the budget and the hikes that came through. I think one of the stocks that has surprisingly seen a bounce is ITC. Maybe that's what we can discuss next week. Why is that happening, and is it a good time to get into ITC?
Right. Interesting
Yeah.
conversation for next week. Yash, would
Cigarettes
you
and
like to
trains.
sing? Ooh,
Actually, we did cigarettes and sexes.
did we?
Cigarettes are.
That's the
No, I mean,
band.
sorry, Mila Club. Yeah, but come on, Pineapple Man, keep up.
I
Becomes
thought we were talking about
Monomer
Pineapple
Restoration.
Express.
Oh, that's also a good movie
Yeah.
about which we cannot talk on Indian YouTube.
And that's a wrap, guys.